My name is Antonina Broyaka, and I'm originally from Ukraine. And I think many people already follow my webinars that I'm doing almost a year. Unfortunately, this is a year since the full-scale Russian war in Ukraine has begun. And this is a year since I'm here in Kansas. I really appreciate all help and all support that I've got here at Kansas State University, especially on Econ department, and that I have opportunity to spread the information about what is going on in Ukraine. Few words about how I got here a year ago. That was a really hard journey. We woke up from the sound of bombing that morning, and we didn't know what to do and where to run and what will be the future. And after sitting several days in the shelters with my children, we decided that I need to go somewhere and keep them in a safe place. And we literally walked to Poland through the Polish border, spent some time there, and then we arrived here to Manhattan, Kansas. So here am I, and I continue to share the information about Ukraine. So unfortunately, the year of this horrible war in Ukraine brought a lot of damage, a lot of deaths to my country, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about the influence of the war on Ukrainian agriculture, and specifically on a wheat market, flour market, and corn market. As for now, Crimea and four southeast region of Ukraine are still occupied, and Russia is desperately trying to seize more territory, but our brave military are not allowing this to happen. Unfortunately, the price for freedom from Soviets and independent democratic development is too high. Since the beginning of the war, more than 8,000 civilians killed, among them almost 500 are children, more than 13.5 thousand civilians been wounded, among them almost 1,000 children. More than 16,000 children were kidnapped and illegally deported to Russia. Ukraine lost 11,000 soldiers. At the same time, Russia lost 155,000 troops, and they don't care how much more they will lose and how much more money they will spend on war instead of investing in the development of their own economy. As of January 2023, the total amount of documented damage to Ukraine's infrastructure as a result of full-scale invasion is estimated at $140.2 billion at replacement cost. The direct losses of agricultural producers are estimated at $7.8 billion. The biggest losses are recorded in agricultural machinery, finished products, grain storages. The estimate of indirect losses is $30.2 billion. The biggest losses are in the crop production and price reduction categories. 16% of all cultivated area are still on occupied territory. Another 3.8 million hectares, or 13.4%, cannot be sown due to closeness to the front line remains of shell and mines. The consequences of the war affected every sphere of agriculture in Ukraine. According to the results of 2022, the production of grain crops decreased by 37% compared to the previous record harvest of 2022, and amounted 53.4 million tons. The production of oil crops was reduced by 24% and amounted 17.5 million tons. This is caused not only by the reduction of the cultivated areas, but also the yield decrease and the extended harvest. The livestock industry was less affected than crop production, but there are also significant negative impacts. According to the result of 2022, the production of meat of all types decreased by 11% compared to 2021 and was at the level of 3 million tons. Milk, 7.7 million tons, minus 12%, eggs, 11.6 billion pieces, minus 18%. The main reason for the reduction in this sphere are occupation and destruction of production facilities, physical death of part of livestock during hostilities, and temporary disruption of the production chain on providing growing livestock at the beginning of the war. That was mainly related to poultry farming. A quite logical consequence of the reduction in production volumes is a reduction in export. However, the main reason is not in production, but in the blocking of seaports by Russian troops, which were a traditional export route for Ukraine. Only thanks to the unblocking of the 3 out of 18 Ukrainian ports and the developing of alternative routes through the western borders, it was possible to achieve relatively good results in the current circumstances. According to the result of 2022, 38.4 million tons of grain were exported, which is 24% less than in 2021. 7.9 million tons of oil crop, or 2.1 times more, and 4.6 million tons of vegetable oil, which is minus 17%. The dynamics of growth of the export of oil crops is explained by the decrease in the export of products of their processing, mainly sunflower oil and cake, and the need for farmers to receive funds for their future activities. However, this trend is negative for Ukrainian economy as the production and export of value-added products decreases. The most painful and significant problem for the further activities of Ukrainian agricultural producers is the increase in the gap between world and domestic prices. If before the war this gap was about $40 per ton, now it is about $150 per ton for grain. And these are additional costs of the manufacturer, which includes logistic costs, insurance, and all risks that are now borne only by the Ukrainian side. In such conditions, there is no profitability of production, and this directly affects the next sowing campaign, which will be extremely difficult due to limitation of financial resources. Agricultural sector was always the driver of Ukrainian economy, and before the war, the share of agriculture in Ukrainian GDP amounted more than 10%. Despite the decrease in the gross agricultural production in monetary term to $19 billion, the share of agriculture in GDP increased to 13%. This is explained by significantly higher losses in other sectors of the economy, especially damages of industrial and processing enterprises. Ukrainian agriculture remains the most important branch that fills the budget of Ukraine, feeds Ukrainians and many other countries. Therefore, supporting agriculture is extremely important. So this is some information about progress of field work in Ukraine. For the first time in the history, Ukraine is continuing to harvest. Some corn crops are still on the field. Even though we harvested totally 98% of planted area, the harvested area is 29% less than previous time, pre-war time. As for now, we harvested almost 27 million tons of corn. The harvested area of corn is 25% less than in 2021 and 5% less than planted. I'm not sure that those 5% will be harvested. As you can see, the harvested area is almost done, but it's of course decreased except for buckwheat, soybean, and rapeseed. Those crops actually partially replaced loss of winter crops. Average yields per hectare are also decreased due to non-compliance with agricultural technologies, decrease in seed quality, and not following the vegetation calendar. So this is kind of visualization of what we estimated and what we had in the previous years and this year. By the end of the 2022, we had harvested only 21.4 million tons of corn, and it was a big question, would be the rest harvested? But despite the lack of economic efficiency, most of Ukrainian farmers decided to harvest corn in order to provide more grain to the market and feed people and animals, and to return at least some input cost, and of course to clean the field for the next spring sowing campaign. As you can see, many different estimates were made, and of course there is no certain, the situation is so unstable that is really difficult to make any prediction. Finally, we harvested 7 million tons less of sunflower seeds, which is the lowest level for the last decade. The production of barley dropped almost twice. The wheat harvest was reduced by a third compared to the previous year. Actually, we will talk about wheat a little bit later today. From the restoration of its independence from the Soviet Union, Ukraine had a continuous increasing tendency for the grain, legumes, and oil crop production. This was reflected in corresponding increase in export, and even the beginning of the Russian military aggression in Donbass and the annexion of Crimea in 2014 couldn't stop this growth. Of course, this couldn't but annoy Russia, and they wanted to capture and take over our production and export potential. Unfortunately, grain, legumes, and oilseed production fell from 106 million tons in 2021 to 72 million tons in 2022. Export also decreased, but not so much, since we continued to export in 2022 our ending stocks from the previous harvest. This year forecast is not optimistic. the spring sowing campaign just began in the southern region, and according to the preliminary estimates, the sown area under grain crops in 2023 will amount to 8.7 million hectares, which is 22% less than in 2022 and 45% less than in 2021. At the same time, the area under oilseeds is projected at 9.7 million hectares, which is 32% more than in 2022 and 9% more than in 2021. This is the first time when the sown area under oilseeds will be larger than under grain crops. The maximum production of grain, legumes, and oil crop that we can expect, that is 65 million tons. Accordingly, export will be also lower, and we expect it within 45 million metric tons. Several words about our export. Even though our monthly export of grain and legumes in February 2023 reached previous year, we are still behind of our export potential, at least for 25%. This year, in February, we exported more wheat and barley than in February 2022. We also exported significant amount of wheat flour, 16.3 million ton this month. This is actually a positive sign of working milling industry and higher income from value-added production. Since July 2022, Ukraine exported totally 32 million tons of grain and legume. The main sales channel is operating Black Sea ports. Almost 35 million tons of agricultural products were exported from Ukraine to other countries since the beginning of the war. At the same time, it is the most unstable sales channel due to constant Russian negative influence on the Black Sea Grain Initiative and delay with vessels inspections in both directions, from or to Ukraine. The capacity of Odessa's 3 ports is minimum 6 million tons, but we roughly reached 5 million tons per month. And no matter how hard Ukraine tries, the capacity of railway border crossing, destruction of railway infrastructure, shortage of grain carriers, and power outage still do not allow the railway to increase exports much above 1 million ton per month. Corn continues to dominate the structure of Ukrainian export. Since the beginning of the war, we exported more than 21 million tons of corn, which is mostly from the previous year harvest. Wheat export share is twice less than corn. Third place is occupied by sunflower oil export, which exceeded 4 million ton, and export for all commodities has increased since August, when Black Sea Grain Initiative was implemented. Talking about Black Sea Grain Initiative, I would like to remind that it has been extended in November for another 120 days, and its ending day is March 19. It provides a lot of uncertainty because Russia is again trying to block it. Ukraine's side is willing to extend this agreement for not for only another 100 days, but minimum for a year or indefinitely. And another proposal is to include Mykolaiv port, which is second the biggest port in Ukraine with annual capacity around 30 million tons per year. Then monthly exports through Black Sea ports can be increased up to 8 million tons. But the Russian side emphasized that the extension of the packaged grain agreement is possible only if the interests of Russian producers of agricultural products and fertilizers are considered in terms of unhindered access to the world market. As of March 1st, almost 880 shipments of 22.7 million metric tons of grain and other foodstuff left Ukrainian ports. Among them, almost 49% is corn, or more than 11 million metric tons, 6.3 million or 28% of wheat, and 5% of almost 6% of sunflower meal and sunflower oil, and roughly 1 million ton each of rapeseed and barley. The geography of Black Sea Grain Initiative supply is very wide. Turkey is the lead in terms of the number of arriving vessels. Next is Spain, then Italy and China. In terms of tonnage, China is the leading with almost 5 million tons of grain. Then Spain with 4 million tons, Turkey 2.6 million tons. Totally 45% of Ukrainian agricultural products within Black Sea Grain Initiative were delivered to Asia Pacific region, 43.5% to Europe, and 11.5% to Africa. The possibility of uninterrupted export significantly affects balance of supply and demand of grain and legumes. This particular balance consider the grain initiative will continue at least as it is now. Then our export in 2022-23 will lower than in previous marketing year for around 25%. We expect also a certain drop in domestic consumption. In previous year also we had big losses, and also we expect those losses will be lower, as well as fodder grain will decrease due to decrease in livestock heads. We believe our ending stocks by the end of 2022-23 marketing year will decrease twice, but they are still going to be higher than normal. But again, it's under condition that Black Sea Grain Initiative will continue. The war made a huge impact on the grain prices. Even we observed several jumps since the beginning of the war. In general, they have a decreasing tendency, especially during the last months. Today's prices for wheat, barley, and corn are even lower than a year ago before the war started. Unfortunately for Ukrainian producers, the price for Ukrainian wheat is the lowest, and lately was on the level $290 per ton. and Ukrainian corn was sold for $165 per ton. More detailed price changes and tendency for different commodities in different stock exchange are presented in this slide. As I said, all grain prices have now decreasing tendency. Cash market is traditionally higher than futures market, and American wheat was traded on $255 per ton on a futures market and $292 on cash market. So those slides are available online, so you can learn more this number later. So that is about our results of the year of the war and its impact of the agriculture in Ukraine. Do we have any questions? Rich, Alan?
No, there's not.
As we're waiting for questions, and please type them into your chat, I assume in terms of thinking about this, the damage is cumulative. And so things that were damaged last year haven't been fixed or brought back online with regards to demining or those types of things. Is that a true statement, Antonina, that the damage tends to be cumulative on the sector? And so is that one of the reasons why the forecasts are for less production in 2023?
Damage is cumulative, yes, but at the same time, it's also taken into account if something been replaced. But this kind of forecast of decrease of agricultural production is also due to not only due to losses of arable land, but also due to the fertilizer application. We expect that fertilizer would be used for 50, maybe even 60% less than normal. And also, this year the technology very much simplified and not followed. So it means that quality of soil also kind of decrease, and it will influence on a yield. And of course, some territories are hard to sow or harvest, so everything in complex will influence. And also machinery, we don't have enough machineries for now, and also another problem that is a good quality seeds.
There is a question that's come in. Do you have any idea of the effect on input costs, fertilizer in particular? Would think that many of the fertilizer components are being diverted into weapon production or other aspects.
I don't know in particular what kind of expectation for the price of a fertilizer, but yes, we have much lower production and import of fertilizer from other countries. And Ukraine can produce, before the war, we could produce only 30% of what we needed. Unfortunately, some of those enterprises been damaged, but I don't know how those many fertilizers component now diverted to weapon production. That's probably not my expertise.
Did much of the fertilizer, did that come in from Russia before the war, or where did for example, you indicated you could produce 30%. And so where did that
Yeah.
fertilizer come in from?
We do not, for several years, if I remember exactly, since 2019, we introduced embargo for Russian fertilizer supply in Ukraine. So since that time, we do not use Russian fertilizer at all. They come mostly from Europe, and now it's also can be a problem because they used Russian gas to produce some of those fertilizers, right? And now Europe also tries to limit gas supply from Russia, and it means that they probably will produce less fertilizer, and first of all for their own consumption, not for export.
Did that fertilizer come in through the Black Sea, or did it come in through rail from Europe?
It could be both, but in this particular time, it's mostly through the railway.
There's a question here with regards to the winter and moisture on agricultural land. And so how was the winter in Ukraine from a moisture perspective, but also with regards to the winter wheat? Would you anticipate much winter kill as we're starting to end the winter season and transition into the spring season?
I wouldn't say that this winter was much different from previous winters, and we had, as usually, we had snow and we had enough moisture. Of course, we will have some losses in winter wheat, and I know that is going. I read that they are going to replace with some pieces of winter wheat with a spring wheat. It doesn't come on the head of my mind right now, the percentage, but mostly we expect that winter wheat that we planted mostly will come with a good yields.
One of the things that surprised me is kind of the transition to oil seeds, rapeseed and soybean. Is that due to a lack of fertilizer, or what is driving that transition in crop mix?
Yeah, for me, it's also a kind of surprising because that our main usage for sunflower seed, that is sunflower oil production, right? And if ports would be blocked and we will not have opportunity to sell, to export sunflower oil, that is mean that we don't need so much sunflower seeds production. But at the same time, I think the farmers were so affected by the corn harvest this year that was so hard for them that they decided to switch to other crops that they easier to grow and easier to sell then probably. So it's kind of interesting observation what is going on with that.
One of the things we talked about last season was the difficulty for farmers simply because they hadn't been paid for some of the production they made in 2021, simply because it didn't get to market.
Yes.
Has that problem been alleviated, or has that problem become worse with maybe having two crops they haven't been paid for?
The problem is getting sometime worse because, first of all, the price difference in between world market price and domestic price, and in some region which are more close to active hostilities, farmers cannot find who would pick their grain and deliver it somewhere. And the cost of logistics is so expensive that almost all farmers, especially who produce corn, they just lost. They didn't have any profit, but still they continue to produce because it's in terms of marginal cost and the income that they would get, they would cover their losses more than they would stop the operation at all. So that's why it's easier for them to continue operations rather than just resign.
One of the things also that was an issue last year was kind of the storage of grain, lack of facilities. I know there were a lot of effort in terms of storing grain in plastic bags.
Yeah.
How did that turn out? Do you know if that grain has moved? Or unfortunately, sometimes plastic bags, once the weather gets warmer and more humidity, unfortunately, the grain can spoil in those. And so any thoughts with regards to how that fared over the last months since harvest?
Yes, as you know that we lost at least 13 million metric tons of storage capacities, and yet they were partially replaced with those plastic bags with the help of USAID programs and FAO programs. But that is, of course, a short period solution, because for the next year they will not able to use them and they will need again those plastic bags, or because to build a new storage facilities it's necessary at least 10 months or even more, and under this under the war condition not many people are willing to invest into the storage facilities. So yeah, I think for the next year it will be again an issue where to store the grain, but not on all regions, since we are expecting the decrease in grain production. So it's probably would be enough, but again, dependent from the region, because I will show the next slides on the wheat production, and there are some regions where the grain production decrease, and there are some when it is increasing. So we kind of try to replace our losses in one region to another by another.
Any other questions that anybody has?
Oh, there is a question about the grain initiative. If there is a possibility of the export agreement renewal as high or less probable. But I think I already reported this in my presentation that yes, we expect that it will be prolonged, and we want to prolong this at least for 1 year more, but we'll see how it comes. The negotiation continues every day, and today the representative of United Nations came to Ukraine to discuss again this issue with President Zelensky, so we'll see the results. Okay, should we continue and go to the wheat market?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is kind of a dynamic of wheat production in Ukraine. In 2022, 20.2 million tons were harvested in Ukraine, which is extreme minimum for the latest 10 years. This is 40% less than in 2021. Ukraine winter crops are usually prevalent over spring wheat due to the climate and but a significant part of winter crops left on occupied areas or close to active hostilities. So as a result, the harvested area was almost 5 million hectares against 7.1 million hectares in previous year, that is minus 30%. Under the shortage of fertilizer and fuel, as well as a significant increase in the cost of all resources, the yield also decreased, but not as much as it was expected in the spring. The average wheat yield in 2022 amounted 2 tons per hectare, which is only 13% lower than in 2021 and even 6% higher than in 2020. The estimates for a 2023 season are not optimistic. Even if Ukraine will liberate occupied areas, they will be not suitable for agricultural production. Lack of financial assets, reduction in fertilizer application will lead to an even greater decrease in yield. In 2022, 3.76 million hectares of winter wheat were planted for 2023 harvest. And traditionally, we have like 180, maybe 200,000 hectares of spring wheat. It means that we will end up with approximately 3.9 million hectares, which will give us around 14. That is actually pessimistic scenario, 14 million tons of wheat. Some say 16, we'll see. So our spring sowing campaign just started, and the first 3,500 hectares of spring wheat planted already in Odessa region. So we'll see how it will go, but again, we expect that it will be almost 40, maybe more percent less than pre-war time. With average domestic consumption, minimum 8 million tons, export can be shrunk by half compared to 2022. So that is the map that I told. The most significant reduction in wheat production was recorded in the frontline regions. Those in Kharkiv, wheat crop decreased by 61%, in Mykolaiv region by 46%, in Odessa region 37%, Dnipropetrovsk 34%. Together, all those 6 regions, together with Kharkiv and Zaporizhia, they were our top 6 regions of wheat production, and together they amounted 46% of the total wheat production in the country in 2021. It means that we will lose almost half our production capability. The decrease of wheat harvest in the most dangerous region was partially compensated by the increase in production in Western region, in particular in Khmelnytsky region, the increase around 12%, in Volyn region 16%, in Zakarpattia Oblast 28%, Ivano-Frankivsk 36%. However, this increase is not high and could not fully compensate for crop losses even in one of the frontline oblasts. It is quite difficult to assess the quality of wheat crop this year. However, it was no huge decrease in the quality. The average protein content was 11.8% against 12.58% in 2021. The average crude gluten content was 21.6% against 25.9% in the previous season. Simplified cultivation technologies in the condition of the basic resources shortage, of course, made some impact of quality, but some indicators even improved. For example, the content of incomplete grain also turned out to be lower at 1.49% against 2.24 in 2021. In the structure of the examined samples that been done, 39.2% of wheat corresponded to the first, second, and third grade that traditionally attributes to food wheat. 39.5% of samples were of 4 grade and 21.3% of non-standard wheat. Compared to the previous year, the share of food wheat decreased slightly. So in 2021, it was 42.6%, and now it's 39.2%. But it remained at the traditional level for Ukraine. So in general, there is no significant problems with complaints of quality indicators and with the requirements of importing countries. Speaking of wheat exports, since the beginning of full-scale invasion of Russia to the territory of Ukraine, the delivery of grain on the global market been stopped, as you know, almost by 4 months, and only when grain initiative started in August, the export of wheat increased. However, the monthly deliveries of wheat from Ukraine were much behind the previous year. The largest volume of wheat export in 2022 were reached in October, almost 2 million tons, and even exceeding the average monthly export value since December does not compensate for the loss of previous months. Due to limited volumes of grain shipment for export via main seaports, the share of grain delivered by land transport has increased, and the diversification of transportation affected the geography of wheat export. If in July, February of 2021-22, the EU countries were not even on the top 10 important country of wheat. Then at the same period in 2022-23, 5 EU countries entered the top 10 importers, among them Romania, Spain, Poland, Italy, and Hungary. Turkey became the main importer of Ukrainian wheat for the current season. However, in the previous season, this country was in a top 3 main buyers, and in this particular marketing year, its import increased by 25%. Unfortunately, the markets of Egypt, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia are currently lost. We believe we can renew them if grain initiative will be extended. So, but Ukraine has become a main supplier of wheat to the EU, but such deliveries are mostly forced, and the bulk of the volume is still intended for re-export. Moreover, the European Union is traditionally a competitor for Ukraine on the world wheat market, but in the difficult time for Ukraine, good partnership relation allow us work beyond typical competition. So totally, in July, February, Ukraine exported 11.3 million tons of wheat. The estimated wheat export for this year, marketing year, is about 13.5 million tons. So Ukraine is still a top 10 among the wheat producers, but it moved to 9th place. Russia can be, it's fourth here, but it can be third with reported 106 million tons reported by Russian Ministry of Agriculture. 106 million tons, including stolen Ukrainian grain, of course, but in general, a slight increase in world wheat production is expected. At the same time, the total world wheat supply is going to be lower due to the lower level of initial stock that were used to cover increase in domestic consumption. For this marketing year, the world export and ending stock increasing as was expected. The February forecast of USDA for most of indicators were high compared to January. We'll see very soon, in a few days, the March report. I believe Dan O'Brien is going to discuss this next week on the webinar. So in terms of the world wheat export and import structure, Ukraine will remain fifth or maybe sixth on the global market, but Europe will have a significant export increase, including Ukrainian re-export. And of course, Russia plans to export more than 43.5 million tons of wheat, including at least 6 million tons of grain harvested on occupied Ukrainian territory. In terms of world import, Indonesia, Egypt, Turkey, and China are still the main buyers. But wheat import in European Union is doubled, will be doubled this year due to Ukrainian re-export. That is few words about wheat market, and probably I will go further for flour production since it's related to wheat. The flour milling industry of Ukraine is really important as for covering current domestic need for bread baking industry, as for value-added product export. Unfortunately, due to damage or occupation of some milling facilities and also full storage of flour and wheat bran, flour production in this marketing year is lower, at least for 20,000 tons per month than in previous year. The highest decrease of flour over 100,000 tons was for making bread and bakery products. Since the 2018 constant decrease tendency in a flour export was observed, and the highest demand for raw material export quotas and growing domestic consumption caused flour export decrease. The close of Ukrainian ports and the inability to use sea routes to export products forced flour millers to look for new ways to the world market. The choice was tight road or rail transport to the final consumer or to the nearest foreign ports. So that is not cheap even in a peacetime, and now it became even more expensive. As a result, it was the cheapest way to transport flour to the countries directly bordering with Ukraine. The decision of the European Union to open European market for Ukrainian products and eliminate quotas and duties was one of the main factor. After this, the development of European market was faster and resulted in change in Ukrainian wheat flour export geography. So most of Ukrainian flour was shipped to Moldova in 2022, as the logistic didn't change, and the volume of flour exported to Moldova almost doubled. The supply to Poland can be called a real breakthrough. Poland produces an average 3.7 million tons of flour per year and doesn't suffer from the shortage of this product, but the price quality ratio helped to sell 11,000 tons of Ukrainian flour to Poland. So Romania, Croatia, Hungary, Slovakia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Germany are new destination for Ukrainian flour. At the same time, shipment to United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Palestine decreased significantly. Of course, the situation in the country affected the prices, and the prices of the raw materials, which was impossible to export. It is unethical to say, but this situation suited the flour millers, and they got grain lower, and they were able to operate. Otherwise, it would have been really complicated to purchase grain for processing and ensure the country's food security due to high prices. So, but still, because of expensive logistics, we can observe that SIP price is still pretty high. So that is about wheat and wheat flour. Do we have any questions, or should I move to corn? Alan, Rich?
Sorry, I think there are a couple questions. In terms of how reliable are the Russian reported agricultural figures? What level of certainty do you put in those numbers?
That number is directly from the Ministry of Agriculture in Russia. I do not believe on those numbers, and according to the NASA harvest sensing data and USDA reports, they do not see any opportunities that Russia would harvest more than 91, maximum 92 million metric tons of wheat. But I think in this way, Russia just tries to hide the stolen Ukrainian grain and grain that's been harvested on the Ukrainian territory.
And then, are there complaints from EU farmers about Ukrainian grain sales into their markets? Has that been causing an increase or an issue with European farmers, or not so much?
I think not so much for now, because even this grain goes to re-export, the price would be higher then, and Ukraine traditionally has some countries where the grain from Ukraine would go, and Ukraine was mostly in those particular countries. Ukraine was mostly competitor with Russia, not so much with European Union. So I didn't hear yet about complaints from EU farmers about Ukrainian grain. everybody understands what is going on, and everybody is very, very supportive.
And then one more question in terms of in Ukraine on your map of wheat production, you had 0% in several of the occupied regions. Does that mean that that one, does that mean that there will be no wheat produced there, or does that mean that the wheat produced there will probably go into Russia?
Yes, right. It means that it's probably been produced, and according to the, as I just said, NASA sensing data, at least 6 million metric ton of wheat been harvested this season, but we didn't get them. So it means that 0 goes to Ukraine, but probably some will go to Russia.
And so you would estimate, based on US satellite data, that roughly 6 million hectares was harvested in 22?
No, not hectares, million metric tons.
Okay, million metric tons.
Yes, were harvested in 2022.
Any idea in terms of what percentage of that land normally would be seeded in 2022 for the 2023 harvest? Any information that you would have on that, as all in terms of, certainly 0 of it will go to Ukraine likely, unless things change dramatically with the conflict. But what percentage of that would be seeded, maybe compared to 21 or 22? Any thoughts?
So if those 6 regions together would provide 46% of winter wheat usually, so it's, let's say, at least 35% of wheat production were concentrated in this region.
Any ideas in terms of whether or not that area was seeded or not during the fall of 2022?
No, unfortunately, I don't have this information.
That's fine.
I know that some farmers would wish to do that, but there are some very high limitations with that. First of all, Russia forced Ukrainians to get Russian passports and or register their farms and all enterprises under the Russian legislation. And if farmers or other businessmen, entrepreneur would deny to do that, Russian occupiers will not allow them to work, to operate. So it's hard to predict what will go on there.
Okay. Sounds good. And if you want to finish up with your corn market.
Yeah, just a few slides left with the corn. Oops, it's here. So a few more words about the corn. So Ukraine is still in a top 5 exporter in 2022-23 marketing year, but the export will be lower for 16%. If ports will continue operating, our ending stocks will be lower for 33%, but still higher than normal. The biggest pain for Ukrainian corn producer, as I say, that is a gap in between world price and the price for Ukrainian corn for today is almost at $40 per ton that been traded. It makes corn production really ineffective. After unsuccessful year for corn producers, as I already mentioned, many farmers decided to switch from corn production to oil seeds. For the first time, sown area on the oil crop are going to be larger than grain crop. In 2023, we expect the corn crop will be sown on the area. There are from 3 to 3.7 million hectares. There are different estimates, but definitely the production will decrease. We can return to the volume of 2000 14-15, when Russia annexed Crimea and Donbass. The most pessimistic forecast is 16 million tons, both due to sown area reduction and lower fertilizer application, which is expected 50-60% less. If grain initiative continues working and Ukraine export planned 22.5 million ton of corn in current marketing year, then the next marketing year our export will be twice less. But if again, it is very difficult to predict. There are a lot of uncertainties with regards war development, grain initiative extension, input supplies, prices, etc. In terms of geography of corn export, China is still our biggest buyer, but Ukrainian export to China decreased for more than 40%. Spain and Italy were among our top 10 exporter of corn, and their share changed, but also also many other European countries appear in the list. Again, it is forced changed in the importer structure due to the limited export capacity through Black Sea and our alternative export to countries that border with Ukraine. So as I mentioned, we will keep fourth or maybe fifth, but we're pretty sure that fourth place on the world corn market. This marketing year, we'll see what will happen next year. But in this year, we expect that Brazil will move to the second place and replace the Ukrainian losses, as well as some American corn production decrease. So I guess that's it.